Hello, and welcome to the second edition of UConomy. I'm Thomas Fox, Community Outreach Director over at Cambridge Credit Counseling, and I'm being joined live from the Cape by Nunzio Bruno, who's covering the debt crisis in America from the beach. Nunzio, what's it like out there?
It's actually a really great day. As you can see, I've commandeered one of the bedrooms as a mobile office, and it's actually a lot of light. That's a beautiful day. And right out that window is a beach that I'm not on because I'm dedicated to being here for you guys.
That's right. And we had a little rain over here today, and hopefully if you see the light flickers, that doesn't mean that Alfonso hasn't paid the bills. It just means we have a storm going by. Well, we brought up the debt debate because obviously, our show is about UConomy, macro made micro, and taking these larger concepts and really trying to boil it down. But we want to talk a little bit about fiscal responsibility because there's been a lot of talk, people saying, well, the government shouldn't do this and they should do that. There's debates on both sides of the aisle about what really should happen. But when it comes down to personal finance, we actually have an obligation to ourselves to be more fiscally responsible. And Nunzio, obviously your background, you did personal financial planning for folks. And what's a little bit that you encountered with folks? I mean, did you find that people are very active in really trying to engage their finances, or, is it somewhat haphazard? What do you really see?
What I see a lot of is a lot of good intentions and a lot of mental math. And it's not because people don't want to save or don't want to budget. It's because it really boils down to being honest with yourself and really taking responsibilities for what you do with your money. Yeah,
and obviously where I'm at, and we have a really good guest today, Betsy Medina, also from Cambridge Credit. She deals with our housing clients. But from what I see, when people call into my agency, there's a lot of people that just simply don't put a budget together. And that's really alarming. And, I got some stats when we were talking about the show today, and it's interesting. Those with college degrees, 66%, and those that are parents, 65%, are highly likely to track spending against a budget. Stands to reason. You go through college, you got to do accounting, and so you get in that kind of practice. And let's be honest, being parents, it costs you almost $500,000 to $1 million to raise your child from birth until the age of 18. So you've got a budget. I'd like to see those numbers higher, but we got a good start.
Another point that we talked about was before the show actually was that the people that are least likely to actually budget are those in the mid-wage range, anywhere between 30, 40, 50,000. And a big reason for that is because there's a mass sentiment about why bother? Why should I start saving when it's not going to matter anyways? I'm not making big bucks. I'll just work for retirement. So it's this mindset that people have from the outside that kind of pigeonholes them or actually prevents them or creates some kind of decision paralysis in, whether I should go forward and try to budget or, would it even matter if I tried to save a few extra bucks on the side? Because I'm just going to have to spend it somewhere else later anyways.
No, indeed. And, we have a couple of tips we want to give you about if you're trying to become fiscally responsible. If you really want to get a hold of your finances, and you need to, no matter what happens with the debt debates, debates that are going on, we are going to be compromised because of it in our economy. So you have to be more mindful of your money. That starts with understanding where you're at. If you have severe financial problems, admit it. There's no shame in it. There's a lot of people in this country going through a lot of challenges right now, and the first step, just like anything else, is admitting, you may have a problem. It's a good thing because there's plenty of resources out there. There's nonprofit credit counseling agencies, there's financial planners, there's a host of, and the internet where you can get a ton of information. And you may be able to talk to us a little bit as well. Evaluate the issue of fiscal responsibility in the household. Maybe more people might want to budget, but maybe that conversation doesn't come up. What have you found when you were dealing with people in those situations?
Well, money's always a tricky thing. It creates a weird dynamic, even amongst married couples. So let alone larger family units. When you have variable spending plans, so to speak, for kids, parents, and the household in general. Like you said, the biggest step is not admitting that you have a problem. It's being honest about your current situation, and then trying to create goals or a foundation that you can start to build off of that has actual meaning. Because if I'm going to put together some arbitrary plan based on what my general wage numbers are, I'm less likely to stick with it because I'm less connected to it. It's just numbers on a piece of paper, and I don't even believe in what I'm getting behind. So it's about really coming to terms honestly with your goals, your current situation, and really what you want to see out of the plan.
And that's a good point because, you know, we're going into closing right now, but it's a good point because one of the things is you have to use honest numbers. You have to understand the money that's coming in, and you have to offset your costs with expenses, and that's where the country got in trouble. I was saying, oh, we're going to raise the debt limit, and, you know, all these things about how much money we can borrow, and sometimes you need to make cuts, and you might notice that in your household you may need to make some cuts too, and that's okay. It's a very difficult economy, and, you know, watching shows like this, obviously, are going to help you out.
Right, exactly, especially in such a consumer-driven market.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you very much. We're going to cut over to our interview right now with Betsy Medina from Cambridge Credit Counseling. She's going to talk to us about understanding loan modification scams, and you got to pay attention to this.
All right, I'm excited.
All right, well, we just had a very good conversation about fiscal responsibility, and what's really challenging is when people are trying to do the right thing, and then they run into the wrong people. And that's kind of why we want to have Betsy on today to talk a little bit about what a lot of people are facing. And, you know, Nunzio, you've got to know it too, what you see. Foreclosure in our country is just it's a very debilitating process to begin with. And there's so many people going through it, you know.
Absolutely, and a big part of it is that there's not enough education about the process, so people get a little lost in just getting caught in this undertow of debt.
Yeah, and who do you go to if you're even running into these problems? And I think that's where, you know, we've seen loan modification scams, which we're going to talk a little bit about, because you have to be aware of these. And, you know, and I think that's why we want to really have Betsy on to talk about this. Betsy, you know, when people are faced with these issues, I know the first thing is, you know, we're tech guys too. We run right to the internet and I go, okay, I got to modify my loans.
Absolutely.
But what are they running across? I mean, what are people finding out there when they're looking for help with modifying their loans?
Well, first of all, you know, they're worried, they're concerned. A lot of times they don't know where to call, or they assume they're going to call the bank. However, they're scared to talk to the lender. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. A lot of the times, if they don't know that we're out there, they don't know where to go. So when they do find, you know, whether they go online or what have you, or they call their bank and they're asked to come to us or whatever agency, they just find it hard to get their stuff together. They just don't know what they're needing to do anyway.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I hear a lot of people just going right to these loan modification scam places because they punt and they go, you give me $2,000 and I can fix this up. But I mean, so there is a benefit to really talking to a nonprofit, and we want to stress that, a nonprofit housing counseling agency. There's a HAP that's local. There's who else is local around here?
There's HAP. There's Mass Housing. They can go on to NeighborWorks and just find
NeighborWorks website, and you find a local.
Absolutely.
So even if you're out of the area, local and whatnot, there are resources to go to.
Absolutely.
And these folks can help you out. And Nunzio, like I said, you know, we've talked a little bit about your past being a financial planner. How much easier is it for someone to succeed if they have a guide going through these difficult financial issues?
Oh, that's almost a no-brainer. It's exponentially easier, and that hurdle in the beginning is people. The relationship, the psychological relationships with money are so deep that people, there's such a pride there about, you know, I can get myself out of this situation. Yeah. If I work harder, I know I can make it out of it. You keep pushing this stuff back farther and farther and farther, and then, you know, you get to a point where it's unsavable. I mean, that's not even a word, but you can't save it. So just if you had gone out in the early stages to seek help from a professional like Betsy or, you know, a certified housing counselor, all of that could have been avoided, or they could have set you on the right plan so you wouldn't be chasing the whole time.
Yeah, that's another thing too. I mean, you got to realize the people that you're calling. I mean, I'm a certified housing counselor myself, and I've gone through only one portion of the training, and it is an arduous experience at best to get certified in the different aspects. And each practitioner actually has its own subset. Like there's a whole course you can take on foreclosure mitigation and how to help people and things like that.
Absolutely.
You know, and one of the most important things that you learn from these are, what are the common modification scams? Because people are going to call you up, and you know, Betsy and I were talking earlier about some lady who already paid $2,600 to a scam artist and never going to get that money back, and they never helped her out in the first place. And that's a shame, and that's only one story. Betsy, what are these common loan modification scams? How do they get people to call them?
Actually, what happens is that the consumers, once they go online and they, you know, they type in even their bank, and there's a place, obviously, a link where you can go in and type in your information. This information goes out even to, it's available, readily available to all these different companies. Even if you don't put your social, but your name and address gets thrown out. So your phone starts ringing, your number has to go on there so that the bank can call you. However, all these scam companies have it. So they'll start calling you, they'll, offer you, first of all, they'll tell you there's a fee, but they'll tell you that they can get you out of the, or get you a loan modification, first of all. They'll tell you that they'll do a loan audit of your, of your loan. There's many things. They'll guarantee that they can stop a foreclosure if you're already there. They'll tell you that they're a government-approved agency, and these are just really things that you really need to look into.
These are red flags. I say, what you're talking about, I say the biggest red flag to realize, and we're coming into the closing moments here, the biggest red flag to realize is that if they want to charge you a fee. Absolutely. And I would recommend that, again, Cambridge Credit Counseling is a not-for-profit housing counseling agency, but there's other housing counseling agencies around too. If you're not in our area, reach out to a nonprofit agency first if you go through any problem with foreclosure. What would you say, Mr. Bruno, Professor?
I would say the just last little point is, if you feel like you're getting into some trouble, don't just stop whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
That's one of the worst things that you can possibly do. So even if you're seeking help from counselors and these nonprofits and these amazing professionals, just keep doing what you can do to keep your mortgage as healthy as possible. It'll make the process that much easier.
Indeed, it's a lot easier to steer a moving car. Listen, Betsy, thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate the information, and we'll hopefully we'll talk more about this in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Well, listen, we've had some great information so far. We talked about being fiscally responsible. We talked about how to spot loan modification scams. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how businesses are viewed on their fiscal responsibility. And, in this economy especially, small business owners, we've heard a lot about it. It's very hard to get financing, very hard to get funding. And there are some people that want to go through, some opportunity for growth. So, why don't you tell us a little bit, what are banks looking for? If you go to them right now and they say, hey, listen, I want to borrow some money, I can grow. What do they want to see?
Okay, so this is an exciting topic for me because this is what I do. This is my bread and butter, and I've been through this process a couple of times. The biggest things that banks want to see is, number one, a resume. They want to see how successful you've been in either starting businesses, running a business, the industry that you're in. They want to see that you're an expert or that you can take charge of the business. Number two is they want to see solid financials. Even if you haven't started yet, if you're brand new or you're thinking about a business looking for capital, they want to see that you've realistically projected what you think you can make based on what your expenses are and the market that you're in. So it takes a bit of research. And the number three is collateral. They want to see some kind of hard assets like a house. If you already have a business, maybe partial equity in that. They want a way to securitize their investment in you because it's basically a loan. Those are the three biggest things that I've run into as far as getting people from where they are to where the money is.
So now, in the context of fiscal responsibility, it would do you a disservice, and obviously the banking institution a disservice to fudge the numbers, so to speak. I mean, you have to do your due diligence, you have to do projections. And listen, not for nothing, it may cost you a couple of bucks to put together this projected financial plan, obviously, because there's a lot of, first of all, you have to, I would imagine, your SWOT analysis. You then have to evaluate the internal and external forces that could, going to impact your business over the next year or whatever period you're looking for. So there's a lot of, it sounds like there's a lot of digging around you got to do.
Yeah, especially with the costs, because if you don't want to rush this process. A lot of people are like, they want to get into a business or they want to start selling something as quickly as possible. And if you want to do that, I would first recommend starting small, okay? Based on your own capital, whatever you can kind of rustle up with your own two hands. When you're trying to expand, you're looking for a bank to give you, $50,000, $100,000. They're going to want some detail, and it only behooves you to be accurate. If they give you $100,000 and you didn't accurately represent your costs and you overspend, they're not going to give you another $100,000. That's it. And now you're on the hook for that, whether your business wins or loses.
Yeah, it's a situation where you're kind of sitting there with your pockets kind of hanging out of your pants, and what do you do? So you have to do your due diligence. You have to do research. And listen, I've worked with business owners too, and I love business owners. I will say my one comment I usually have about business owners is they know how to run their business perfectly. They sometimes don't know how to run a business though, and that's a challenge. And that's why we like this segment here, because like Dunzio was talking about, it takes some time to put together this plan. I mean, what are some considerations when you're putting this plan together, especially when you're looking at the financial aspect? Where do you find that people like kind of overshoot? Oh, I'm going to spend, I'm going to get a million orders for this hand warmer. I mean, is that, did they overshoot on that, or how does that happen?
Right, that's exactly it. I mean, when you're attached or you're emotionally invested in whatever you create or produce or whatever service you provide, you can kind of rationalize it working for everybody around you, whether it's in your community, your city, or even your state. So you have to be realistic about, what other companies already exist that might do something that you do. What are some substitutes? What companies might you be able to work with to help you further whatever you're doing? And realistically set not just one set of financials, one set of projections, but 3 or 4. You want to know, if you're, based on your assumptions, if you're down 10%, if you're down 20%, if your sales don't match up, if you're, what's your break-even analysis? What's it look like at plus 10%? What's it look like at plus 20%? This range of finances to try to create as accurate a picture as possible, so that you can kind of try to map these, business cycles that work in ebbs and flows. And that's the tough part. It's really just understanding your market and then the market you're existing in.
I've been doing some research reports recently, and what I found is the Small Business Administration actually has a wealth of information that you can find out. What I'm able to do when I go there is I'm able to determine not only the market that I'm in, but the markets that directly correlate to my curves. What other markets, ebb and flow with the market that I'm in. And then from there, you can kind of see, like you're saying, your competitors and things like that, and get a realistic, hey, listen, last year they sold 2 million hand warmers, so it's unrealistic that you're going to sell 3 million this year in your startup. Unless you got a really good deal on hand warmers.
Yeah, exactly.
But you have to know what's going on. You have to know what the market will bear, the prices. I mean, it's so much. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about this because there's so many things to really delve into.
So the takeaway then is if you're in a position to get, if you're ready for that loan or somebody's already giving you some startup capital, just watch that spending. The theme of today overall was spending plans and budgets. So just because you get this big check doesn't mean you should just go blast it, on things that you didn't account for, or upgrades in equipment that you thought you could do with a lower tier, level, coffee machine or whatever it might be.
All right. Well, listen, everybody, thank you again for tuning into another edition of Uconomy, Macro Made Micro. I'm Thomas Fox, and Professor?
I'm Nunzio Bruno.
Nunzio Bruno. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.